Hi, I'm Reid Johnson, president and founder of Lake Point Advisory Group. We're really glad that you're joined us for our monthly online Food for Thought event, How to Stay Calm and Travel On During These Ups and Down Times. Lake Point Advisory Group, as you know, is a retirement planning wealth management firm. We usually discuss things centered around the market, taxes, Social Security, things of that nature. But today we thought we'd put a little bit lighter topic today and start talking about a timely topic, which would be travel. And so we have a large audience today, and to make sure that we can address everybody, we've turned off your cameras and your microphones. But there is a little chat button down at the bottom. So you might have some questions for our special guest today or myself. Feel free to ask some questions, and we're going to get you interactive today as well. So make sure you find that at the bottom of the screen there. Today, we're really glad to welcome Casey Carr from Sharon Carr Travel with us. Sharon Carr Travel is a family-run, full-size travel agency here in Dallas. Casey is the general manager and is an award-winning filmmaker. I want to talk a little bit more about that. Travel writer, and he's on the Dallas 98.7 K-Love radio program, World Tour with Miles in the Morning. And you might have also seen him on WFAA Good Morning Texas. So welcome today. Appreciate you having here.
Thanks so much, Reid. Thanks for having me.
Absolutely. So how are things going? I mean, is travel busy as always, or what are you seeing? I mean, we're in crazy times right now.
Yeah, we are in crazy times. It's Sharon Carr Travel, by the way.
Oh, I apologize, Sharon Carr Travel. Thank you.
No, that's okay. You're not the first person to mispronounce our name. But no, we've been actually quite busy since I guess we started to see an uptick again in last winter. And things have been steadily rising since then. We've been very, very busy for the past 3 or 4 months. A little bit of 2021 bookings, but mostly for 2022 and 2023. There's a lot of pent up cabin fever out there. People have been calling it revenge travel in our business. They've been trapped at home for a year and a half now, and they're splurging on their big vacations.
That's great. Well, it seems like, every day there's something new. So I'd kind of like to start off on the big picture. If someone right now, wants to travel before the end of this year, you talk about there's a big surge for next year, but let's say somebody has that pent up, they're ready to revenge travel now. What do they need to know before planning a trip right now?
So, the first thing I want people to know is that travel is still viable and it's wonderful, and there are people out there having really wonderful experiences. And since the start of the pandemic, we've sent people all over the world, and we haven't had a single positive case in any of our travelers. That's not to say that people aren't traveling and getting COVID, but the track record of the travel industry has been very, very good. And a lot of people have been traveling this year and even having a once in a lifetime experience. If you go to a place like Peru or Machu Picchu right now, you basically have the place to yourself, and there's reduced capacity in hotels around the world and at attractions and things like that. And so you just have less of a crowd to fight, frankly. And that's one of the, if you can find a silver lining in all of this situation, that's one of them. But we also have to level with people about the risk that all travel carries with it right now. There are just risks, and if you book a trip, you can be inconvenienced or worse, or your trip can get canceled, especially with cruises. We'll talk about a little bit about that later in our discussion. And you can also catch a potentially lethal virus, frankly, even if you are vaccinated. So those are risks that people have to assume when they travel right now and for the foreseeable future. Unfortunately, that's all the bad news up front. But there's lots and lots of good news in the travel industry, and things are going well. There's going to be setbacks. There always are in situations like this. There have been all along. But like I said, the track record in the travel industry is actually quite good in terms of COVID, and the protocols and various things that are in place are working. If you're traveling domestically, masks for sure are required. Most places that you go. If you're traveling internationally, there are a few countries that are not requiring proof of vaccination at this point. They're like, you can get into Costa Rica, I believe, without a vaccine or even a test. Mexico, you can go without a vaccine. I expect some of those things will change And there are just some hoops that you have to jump through right now to do things like that. I'm going to Canada later this month with one of our K-Love groups on the Rocky Mountaineer. And before we depart, we have to, first of all, you have to present proof of vaccination when you travel. We have to have a negative COVID test before we depart. We have to take another negative COVID test. We have to get another negative result right before we get on the train. And then later, when we get to Vancouver, we have to take yet another negative COVID test to fly back into the country. So all of that sounds much worse than it actually is. It's actually not that, hardly even an inconvenience, honestly. And I've had we know this because we've been polling people all year and talking to our travelers. I've had a lot of people go to Tahiti this year. The hoops that you have to jump through to get there are somewhat similar. You have to take a lot of tests. You self-administer a couple of your tests there in Tahiti, and it's just not that big of a deal. It's not as difficult as it sounds, and the people there where you're traveling are there to make the process simple and as painless as possible. And there's lots to know about restrictions and things like that. These things can be hard to keep up with. I've got some notes here, by the way, so if it looks like I'm shuffling papers, I've just got a little bit of an outline. For different destinations, you have to go through different protocols. You have to fill in online health forms for some destinations. If you're traveling domestically, like I said, you don't really have to do anything. You can go anywhere within the United States without needing a test or any proof of vaccination.
That's great. Well, we've had quite a few people jump on since we first started. So we have Casey Carr with Sharon Carr Travel. They're actually a Dallas-based travel company, but help people all throughout the United States. I was sharing with him. We have families that we work with, not just in the United States, but have actually gone to live abroad as well. So it's lots to unpack and talk about today. So if you're wanting to go, maybe what would be the easiest destination for somebody who that you've seen? They're like, hey, I want to get away, but I don't want to go through all of those testing elements that are going on right now. What kind of places can you go without going, getting that, if somebody felt like that was an invasive type situation?
Well, your options are getting slimmer and slimmer. Like I mentioned, you can go to Costa Rica right now without proof of vaccination or a test. At least you could the last time I checked. And reminder, these things change all the time. So tomorrow the story could be different. Tomorrow they could come out and announce a new policy and new protocols. And that's something to think about also, that if you run that risk. If you were to book a trip to Costa Rica for 2 months from now, and in the interim, their policies change, you would have to abide by their new policies. The only place that you don't face that risk is, of course, domestically. And a lot of people, it's been another silver lining of this whole situation, is that people are discovering our country again, and just how beautiful things are. There are so many incredible destinations that run the gamut from, if you're into the mountains, if you're into the beach, if you're into culture, if you're into art, you can find something here that fits that bill. As we get into winter, our options get slimmer and slimmer there as well, because Maine is a wonderful place to visit, but not in February.
Sure.
And so those are kind of the options. If you are vaccinated and you don't mind the testing, then the world is currently open up, but there's a bit of up and down, which I'm sure we'll talk about a little bit later in the discussion. But it's been a roller coaster in terms of countries opening up and then closing back down and adjusting their protocols. And everybody's doing the best that they can. We don't, begrudge any of these countries for implementing sensible health policies, but it's been difficult to navigate for a lot of travelers out there.
One of the things I saw that the CDC came out with a list of countries on their alert list this past week. What countries should people consider traveling to, and which ones should they avoid right now?
Well, that's hard to say because, as I mentioned, it's just been up and down. A country could be at a level 4 this week, and next week it's downgraded, or you could have booked your trip and now the country that you're traveling to has been upgraded to a level 4. I have a very good friend who is going to Spain and France. Spain and France are on that list that the CDC just upgraded to a level 4. And he leaves tomorrow, and he's going on that trip. He's talked and worked closely with his tour company. He's on an archaeology trip. And the CDC makes recommendations. They don't make laws, and the CDC does a lot of CYA, frankly, and they're trying to do the best they can. I think an abundance of caution is the right state for a public health organization to be in during a pandemic. So, it's just important to remember that the CDC does not make laws. They're making reservations, and no matter what they've upgraded or downgraded your destination to, you can still travel to that destination. Talk with your travel agent, talk with your tour company about that. Nobody's going to send you somewhere where you're going to be imperiled.
That would be awful.
Right.
What are some of the new protocols for airline travel right now? I mean, I've had some folks that have said, hey, they've been driving a lot more. I know RV sales went through the roof, right?
It's true.
What are the new protocols? What should somebody, if they haven't flown yet, or if they've flown a while ago, what are the protocols right now for airline travel?
Well, domestically, they're of course, in any airport, masks are required inside the airport. They're required on board the plane. There have been a lot of incidents this year. I believe the TSA has issued more than $1 million in fines to unruly travelers this year who have a problem with wearing a mask or whatever other protocol happens on a plane. We've had a lot of people travel, as I mentioned, this year, and nobody has seen any incident like that. I think it gets blown out of proportion in the media. More people are just going along with the protocols and getting where they need to go. If you're traveling internationally, you have to have proof of vaccine. When you're flying back into the country from anywhere in the United States, you have to have a negative test, even if you have proof of your vaccine. And a lot of countries that you're flying to, they'll require you to show proof of the vaccine and also show a negative test. Within the airports, there are a lot of, most of the new protocols that the airlines have implemented are behind the scenes. They're protocols in terms of how they clean the planes, how they sanitize everything. I actually went out to the airport last year and got a demonstration of this from American Airlines and the entire process that they go through to clean these planes and wipe everything down and sanitize everything. And they have this spray that coats every surface in an antimicrobial film. And it's really incredible. I mean, you could conduct a surgery inside one of these airplanes because there's such a sterile environment after they get finished with it. And it's one of the reasons, frankly, that the airline industry has had such success returning to business without these massive outbreaks that we see on land.
What if somebody went on a trip and they went, like, let's say international, somewhere where they had to get a COVID test to come back and they had a positive? How does that work? I mean, as a travel agent, are you having to rebook them a room? I mean, are these resorts or wherever they're going, are they understanding of this? Like, what are you seeing if somebody does have a positive test coming back, or have you seen that?
We fortunately have not had anybody travel and receive a positive test, but we have a lot of friends in the industry who've had people in that situation. And things are changing early on. And Reid or Rob, you and I were talking earlier about Mexico and how well Mexico has done during the pandemic, and how they're one of the only places open to Americans to travel to. And so they did very well. I wouldn't say actually that they did well during the pandemic. They suffered very much like everybody else did, but they were a destination that everybody could go to and that everybody felt comfortable going to because of, first of all, the protocols that they had in place, but they were also providing that, every new policy that would come out from the CDC, now you have to have a test to come back to the United States. They were on top of it. They were in many cases providing the testing for free at the resorts, and many of these resorts were even guaranteeing you a room if you had to quarantine, if you received a positive test and had to quarantine. There's a lot of fretting about what if I what if I go overseas and I get a false positive test? Well, if you got a false positive test, you test again the next day and the day after that until you get a negative test, and then you're allowed to return home. So a positive test doesn't necessarily mean that you have to quarantine for 14 days. It just means that you have to quarantine until you receive a negative test and you can return home. We are seeing not as many resorts are covering that room. They're relying on people to book their own travel insurance that will cover things like that.
So that's a great thing. So you can purchase travel insurance for something like that. I mean, that is something that travel insurance covers. If you go out, somewhere and you get COVID, then they're going to cover. I always thought about it as a cancellation, but you can also have insurance to make sure you have a place to stay. Okay.
That's correct, and it would typically fall under. And every policy is different, mind you. So you have to be sure that your policy covers things like that. And there are upgraded policies that travel insurance companies have come out with now that cover things like that. And in fact, a lot of destinations are actually requiring travelers to purchase travel insurance. I have a trip to Finland in December, and Finland requires you to have a specific level of travel insurance. You have to have, I believe it's $50,000 in coverage for that scenario if you have to be quarantined. Short answer is yes, those things are covered, but you have to look very closely at your policy to determine what things are covered and what things aren't.
Okay, great. That's good. All right, well, now we're going to jump into my favorite topic, which is cruising. I love to cruise. I have not been on one, obviously, since I know that I've had a few, the families that we work with, multiple advisors in our firm have had families that have actually, taken off and been on some cruise ships. So talk to me about this, talk to me about what's changed over the last 2 years. How are things looking now?
Well, I'm with you. I'm a lifetime cruiser. I was born into the cruise industry. My mom had us on cruises when I was literally just a baby. And I used to work in the cruise industry as well. And I've just been on cruise ships. It hasn't been a year that has passed until this past year that I wasn't on a cruise ship. And cruisers are like that. And if you're just, those people love cruising. They don't let a year pass without being on board a ship. And, the cruise industry has the tallest hill to climb, in my opinion, in all of the travel industry, and maybe honestly of any industry in the world. I mean, I can't think of another industry that had to completely pause operations for a year and a half and have absolutely no revenue coming in. And it was devastating to them, obviously. And there were some changes that came about as a result of that. Some cruise sales, some cruise lines selling off some of their older ships and things like that. On board, some of the protocols have changed. The buffet is still actually there, but now you have someone who serves you from the buffet instead of you going up and collecting whatever you want on your plate, which could be, if you're like me, it could be a little embarrassing to walk up and say, I need 7 slices of pizza. So it's one of those things that you have to get used to. And on board, they have some additional safety protocols that, if you've been on a cruise in the past 20 years, they have sanitization stations all around the ship anyways, where you sanitize your hands. They have little people walking around with spray bottles, spraying them into your hands because of things like norovirus and things like that have happened in the past on cruise ships, which frankly happen much, much more on land at hotels and things like that. And the cruise industry kind of gets a kick in the shorts every time something like this happens. It gets reported pretty breathlessly that it's just a scary situation. It's a scary idea of being in a sorry, I don't know if I cut out there for a second. It's a scary idea of being trapped out at sea and something like that happening. And so there's a lot of hesitation for people to take cruises right now. And since we've seen cruising restart in the US, there have been a lot of successful sailings. I'm sure you guys saw that, or you might not have seen that there were some positive cases on a Carnival cruise lately. Recently, there was, in fact, one of these poor women tragically passed away about a week or so ago. And, that's a sad story. Nobody wants to see anything like that. And it's just, in the cruise industry, we're expecting some setbacks and some ups and downs and things like that. And they're doing the best that they can to protect everyone. And most cruise lines are requiring proof of vaccination. Carnival Cruise Lines, Royal Caribbean, and others are requiring, I believe it's 95% of their passengers to be vaccinated. They're leaving a little breathing room for children because children aren't able to get vaccinated yet. And 100% of their crews, or in the case of Norwegian Cruise Lines, they require 100% of their crew and 100% of their guests on board to be vaccinated. So measures like that are going to cut down on infections and outbreaks and things like that, things that are such massive setbacks for the cruise industry, or really any facet of the travel industry. Outbreaks are a major setback, and requiring vaccination is really the only way to get past that.
Yeah, that's got to be a tough situation. It's a lot of fun, but you want to make sure that the people are safe for sure.
That's right.
Kind of sticking with the cruise theme, how do you recommend someone decide whether cruising tours, river cruises, independent travel is right for them? I mean, let's say somebody's like, hey, I'm ready to travel, I'm vaccinated, for whatever reason, they're just, they're retiring. And we have a lot of families we work with who are retiring during COVID, and they've got to this point to travel. I mean, they're in their financial plan, they're putting travel budgets here. And so if somebody's on the fence about where do they go, what type of thing, how do you help somebody decide what's the best trip for them?
Well, that's a great question. And part of the fun of our job, and I would say use a travel agent. Everybody has travel agents in their community. You can call us, but it's part of our job to help determine that and listen to people's questions and give people options. And there's some intuition involved in talking with our clients and determining what they're looking for. And so the best I can do is talk a little bit about each form of travel. And when I refer to independent travel, I mean, basically you're getting a hotel and a car or maybe train tickets or something like that, and you're on your own. You're not with a destination management company. You're not with a tour or anything like that, which that's one of my favorite ways to travel. There's nothing wrong with traveling like that. I love doing that, especially if I've been to the destination before once or twice, and I just know it. I've done the touring. I've seen that. It's nice to be on your own. Tours are typically with a group. So when you book like a Trafalgar tour of Italy, for example, you'll be with other travelers from around the world. You'll have a guide who takes you through the whole experience and who is educating you on what you're looking at and giving you the history and anecdotes. And they're wonderful. They're PhDs and they're comedians on the other hand, and they really make the whole experience. Some of my best memories are being out on some of these Kalos tours and having a guide with us. And I'm still friends with a lot of the guides that I met growing up when I was a kid. And it's a great way to get a very good in-depth experience of a destination where you don't know much about the destination. You want to learn, you want to skip the lines at a lot of these different attractions that you're going to. And a lot of times I'll have clients come in and they kind of turn their nose up at tours a little bit. I don't want to be with a big group of people. I'll say, well, what do you want to do? And they'll say, well, I want a hotel in a good area of Rome. And then, we want to book tours every single day. And so we'll probably just join some of the group tours. Well, now they have to leave their hotel and walk a few blocks away to another hotel to join a group tour. And by the end of it, they've talked themselves into something like a Trafalgar tour where all of that is included. It's discounted. You're skipping the line at the Vatican, which is sometimes 2.5 hours. You have your guide with you. So it's just, you have to weigh those things when you're traveling. Cruising, as we were talking about, is such a wonderful way to travel. I love it. It's a great way to get a taste of several different destinations. It's not in depth at all. It's not in depth in the way that a Trafalgar tour is, but there are a lot of different options with itineraries where you overnight at different ports. Hawaii is great to see by cruise. Alaska is great to see by cruise because so much of what is to see there is along the coast. And it's a vacation. It's a legitimate vacation where I don't know if I would say the same thing about touring. I've been on some tours that are grueling, and by the end of it, I need a vacation. and cruising, you know, you've got shows, you've got the spa on board, you have this incredible food, you're pampered, you are really pampered. And there's nothing wrong with that experience. A lot of people like to be, you know, especially romantic about their travel, and they think they need to be on the back of a donkey going through, you know, wherever. You should pamper yourself. Everybody works hard, and you know, there's nothing wrong with that part of cruising, in my opinion. And cruises are great for family trips also, because you're all in one place together. You know, you're there. You can't get off the ship when you're out at sea, so you're spending a lot of time together. You're enjoying all your meals together. Um, and then river cruising is basically a hybrid of that. And Rena, I don't know if you've done a river cruise. We're big on river cruising in my office. Most of my film work, in fact, has been done in the river cruise industry for Uniworld River Cruise Lines. And it's a hybrid of cruising and touring, where you're seeing the country from the interior, and you're in a different port every day, so you have the convenience of only unpacking once, which is one of the best things about cruising, that you get to see all these different places, and you're not having to pack your bag every 2 nights and then get to a hotel and unpack your bag. You're unpacking at the beginning, and then this incredible resort just follows you around, carries you to all these different destinations. And so you have a lot of convenience of cruising. You've got the meals included. You have this sort of all-inclusive nature. You have activities. You have excursions and things like that. And then you have a lot of the benefits of a tour, like the guides, like Uniworld and Viking, and most of the river cruise lines have guides just the way that Trafalgar does. They're with you throughout the program, and they're carrying you through the destination. Uniworld has a wonderful product in Egypt that I made the film for a couple of years ago, and all of their guides on board are certified Egyptologists, and in many cases PhDs, and there are fountains of knowledge. And it's such a great value to be in a place like that with somebody like that who knows what they're talking about, and can enrich the destination for you. So I love river cruising. It is an incredible way to travel, in my opinion. And all of these trips also, you can add different elements on that are part of both. You know, you can stay 3 nights in Rome at the beginning of your trip and have that independent experience, and likewise on any river cruise or anything like that. So, you know what you want. That's the most important thing I could tell you. And sometimes it may just take some kind of thinking about that to really boil it down what you really want. Sometimes you need a travel agent to help you. And if we could do a little experiment, Reid, that I like to conduct, I'd like to ask your audience there to think back to a vacation that you took recently, the last great vacation that you had, and think of something memorable or wonderful that happened on that trip, that your favorite part of that trip. And just type it in the question field to read, and we'll read through a couple of those here in a few minutes. But yeah, just think back to your last vacation, and pick out a thing or two. It doesn't have to be long, a couple words or a sentence about what you really loved about that trip.
All right. Well, while we're waiting for people to put that in, I do have a couple of questions that have popped up here. I've gotten so into this, I totally forgot. So I had Miss Britton over here asked, aren't there places in the U.S. requiring proof of vaccine to eat in restaurants, etc.? If so, where are these places currently? Have you heard of anything like that?
We've heard rumors of things like that. I haven't heard any confirmation of things like that. I don't know of any state that has a mandate, that has like a government mandate on requiring vaccines to enter restaurants or museums or things like that. I think individual restaurants and individual museums will make that determination on their own, depending on their local governments. But that is something that we just sort of have to roll with. There, that's the nature of travel right now, is that some places might not be available to you.
Awesome. Another question came in from Lee Midkiff, was basically, question we take tropical destinations after Christmas. This year they're leaving on December 27th. Is there any foreseeable problem with getting test results back in a time frame, with Christmas being like, so they need to get that window within 27, on the 27th, the Christmas is here. Do you think they're going to have an issue with that 72-hour window? Have they given you any indication for people traveling around those holidays?
So they're leaving on December 27th,
Yeah.
and they have the 72 hours is the 2 days after Christmas. So, I could foresee something like that, but there are a lot of different options around the Metroplex. We have a couple of very good resources here in Dallas. And actually, they have offices around the Metroplex. One of them is called, I believe it's called Amera Immunize, which is AMERI immunize or immunization. You can Google that. They have many offices around the Metroplex, and there are other mobile offices. A lot of those urgent care facilities will stay open even on Christmas, and you can go in and get your testing done there. And so, there are a lot of options, but you definitely want to have that nailed down well in advance.
Yeah, that's going to be a problem. So, yeah, I mean, especially if you're on that trip around Christmas time. So hopefully that will be easy to do. And then the last question, and I'll kind of bring up some of these places where people have enjoyed going. Russell Barnes asked, you mentioned briefly, but didn't cover much detail about currently traveling with children under 12 that can't be vaccinated. What are the best ways to keep children safe and still travel?
Right. I have very young children as well, and we have a cruise booked in December with Carnival. We are considering canceling it because of the regulations around vaccination, and because we feel a little bit uncertain, frankly, about bringing our unvaccinated children on board a ship where they could be potentially exposed. So that's a question that everybody needs to kind of answer for themselves about what level of risk they're willing to accept. You obviously have to follow the policy recommendations of the ship. With Carnival, what will happen if they don't relax the policy by December, which I do not anticipate that they will relax their vaccination policy, we'll have to get a waiver because they don't require 100% of their passengers to be vaccinated at this time. So we'll have to get a waiver for our children to travel. And when we do that, once we get on board the ship, then we can't actually get off in port unless we're on board one of Carnival's bubble excursions, where they keep everybody together. You're not allowed to leave the excursion, and that's not appealing to us. And so we have to make that decision. My whole family's on that cruise, so we may end up going anyways. My wife is of the opinion, I don't even care about the ports. I just want to be on the ship and enjoy myself. I feel safe in the environment, frankly, because most of the people on board are going to be vaccinated, and everybody else will have had a negative test. So, we'll have to make that decision in the coming months, but that is something that parents are grappling with. I would say, we are hoping that, and I know most parents are hoping that the vaccination is going to be approved for younger children very soon, especially those of you who have, my kids are 3 and 1.5. So we don't have to worry about school, but everybody else has to worry about sending their kids off to school, and they can't vaccinate them. That's that's the answer to the problem for a lot of us who want to take our kids to travel. Is hopefully the FDA will approve it for administration to children younger than 12.
Okay, thank you for answering those. So here's the places that people have said that they enjoy going. Some of these sound amazing. The oldest has said that they like the Smoky Mountains and a train ride. It wasn't crowded. Sounds like that sounds pretty amazing. The Carter said 24 hours of Le Mans, being in the Corvette racing team and watching the parade in the town of Le Mans. That's awesome.
Wow.
The Beaver said, we are going to New York City next week. We have already received notification from Vitor, the ticketing agent for the museum and such in New York City, that they are requiring vaccinations to enter at all. So that answers the question we had earlier. We had the Laker, Avi Laker said that just got back from Iceland. Beautiful country, greatest thing was just going out after being at home for 18 months. So that's a great first trip out. And then the Beavers are also planning on going in October to Scotland and Spain. They wanted to know if you see any issues with that. I mean, that's a couple months away. And then we got rum tasting in Jamaica. We got Switzerland and trains through the Alps. And they said it was the best experience they ever had. So
beautiful. Well, first to answer your question about Scotland and Spain, it's impossible to say what things are going to be like in October. The CDC just did raise Spain to a level 4. But we talked about that. The CDC is not making regulations; they're making recommendations, and you need to work with your tour company closely, work with your travel agent closely. We are constantly monitoring the situation in countries all over the world, especially where we have travelers going. So we're up to date on regulations and restrictions, and keeping our passengers informed that way. And it's a waiting game. In a lot of ways, you have to kind of, bide your time and be sure that you're not canceling too early when you could go on and enjoy your trip. So stay the course would be my advice at this time. But it just depends. I don't know if you're actually going to Scotland first and then traveling straight to Spain. That sounds like a really beautiful trip. But like I said, the CDC level 4 does not preclude you from travel. So just keep an eye on the regulations and restrictions there, and keep in close touch with the tour company and your travel agent. And so going back to the places and all these incredible experiences that we just listened to, that you read off for me, Reid. I want everybody to recognize that nobody said, well, I got $100 onboard credit, or gosh, they gave me free Wi-Fi, and that just made Rome so much better. They're talking about the experiences that they had, and what that trip meant to you in terms of how it enriched your life and how it added to your memories. And those are the things that we tell our clients to consider. I love a good deal. I'm always looking for the best price that I can possibly get. But there's been times in the past where I paid for that, where I got the deal as cheap as I possibly could, and then I ended up with a cheap experience instead of, my grandpa used to tell me that things cost what they cost, and I didn't understand that for the longest time, and now I understand that you pay for the experience that you're going to get, and a certain level of experience costs a certain amount. You're not going to find a Regent cruise experience for a Royal Caribbean price. You might find something like that, but it's not going to end up being what you want. So I'm not saying don't take cost into consideration. We all have to take cost into consideration, but consider consider the value of what you're booking and what it's going to add to your experience and your vacation. Don't cut corners where it's important.
Okay. That's awesome. I did have one last question that came in there. He was asking, Mr. Johnson was asking to explain the levels. Not sure what each level means.
The State Department levels?
I think so, yeah.
Right. So when you get above level 2, level 3 and level 4, and I believe 4 is the highest, if I'm not mistaken, and forgive me because I'm not an expert on these levels. But 4 is basically a do not travel advisory, which, pre-pandemic, Mexico was at a level 4 at times because of things happening somewhere in central Mexico or something like that. Well, that doesn't necessarily mean that Cancun is having the same issues. There's a new level 4 advisory for Turkey, which my friend who I mentioned earlier, who's on the archaeology trip, a significant portion of his trip is in Turkey as well. Well, the unrest and the things happening in Turkey are in one specific area. And to give you an analogy, it would be like going to Austin and worrying about unrest in Albuquerque. The things are that far apart, and it doesn't mean that you have to cancel your trip if there's a level 4 travel advisory. Like I mentioned, the CDC does a lot of CYA, and they have to cover all their bases, and if they see something and going by their data, they have to make recommendations that they deem prudent. And we try to follow those recommendations as much as we can, but we also try to work very closely with our tour companies and our people on the ground who know the actual situation on the ground and can determine if it's necessary to cancel your trip.
And Mr. Johnson, just to answer your question or anybody's question, if you go to travel.state.gov, travel.state.gov, you can literally search any of the destinations you're going to. Level 1 is exercise normal precaution. Level 2 is exercise increased caution. Level 3 is reconsider travel, and number 4 is do not travel. But as he mentioned, it doesn't mean that you can't. There's just their recommendation from the level of what they're experiencing there. And it's not just about the COVID. I saw that. I've seen this at different times. When there's been terrorist type potentials in different areas. So this is just one of those times where you're going to see elevated areas in different areas. So
that's a good point, Reid. And I honestly, I wouldn't say that we ignore those travel recommendations, but there have been many places that I've traveled to in the past. I mentioned I went to Egypt a couple of years ago. Egypt was at a level 4 when I traveled there. I've been to India a couple times. Both times India was at a level 4 when I traveled there. And so, there are a lot of countries around the world with dangerous places, including our country, with no-go zones. So we don't disregard those travel warnings, but we know that it's a complex issue.
Yeah, well, great. Well, I want to thank you very much for taking the time to join us today. We had a ton of great questions and obviously a lot of great places. I mean, there's still been a few more coming in here, 73-day cruises and that nature. I am jealous. I need to go on those. Colorado riverboat cruises. That sounds amazing. So I apologize if there was any questions that we didn't get to. We want to be cognizant of your time, but if you need more information that we didn't answer, or if you have questions, feel free to reach out to Sharon Carr Travel. Their website is Sharon, SHARON, Carter, CarrTravel.com. So SharonCarTravel.com. And Casey's direct email is Casey@SharonCarTravel.com. He can also be reached at 800-648-4856. Thank you so much for being part of our Food for Thought discussion today. We look forward to seeing you at our next Food for Thought or one of the reviews. Appreciate you guys. Have a great day. Thanks.